Şimdi salondaki
Actually, we do not want to keep the audience waiting, so I'd like to start right away. Of course, we had a delay coming from the morning sessions, but I'm sure we will have more crowd in the course of time. At least close the doors, please. Now, distinguished guests and the panelists, I would like to welcome you all on behalf of the organizing committee, and also I'd like to thank to all who contributed to the organization of the Turkish Wind Energy Congress, in particular the TWEC and all the sponsors. Congratulations and thank you. The topic is whether Turkey will be a regional hub in terms of the wind energy. And of course, especially as you all know, in Turkey, this term is used a lot. I mean, it's not only something specific to our industry and becoming the center of attraction, to becoming a hub, not only in the wind energy, in transportation, for example, in industry from time to time, especially for the automotive industry. People are always saying whether Turkey could be a hub because we have a good production capacity. Also, in the other fields of energy, we heard it a lot for oil and natural gas, especially for the transit pipelines, being an energy corridor, being a hub. I mean, being an energy corridor would rather be turned into a hub or not, whether we will have further trade here. Of course, the policymakers and at the same time all the stakeholders in the market are all discussing whether Turkey could be a hub or not. Today, again, under Turkey and energy, in renewables, in the wind energy, whether Turkey has the opportunity and the chance to become a hub or not. We have very distinguished speakers from the industry and from the investor side. Today we'll be discussing it in this session, and then if we have some questions, if time allows, we also will get to your questions. Probably you heard it a lot, I know, but better to repeat it. As for those who received a license in Turkey, it is over 10,000 megawatts, and around over 40% of those, 4,200 megawatts is in operation, 1,000 megawatts is under construction. And for the 5,000 megawatt, what is going to happen for that? I don't know, maybe after the discussion of this panel, we will understand what would happen to it, especially for those who applied for it, whether they can continue with their projects or not. We heard it from the industry, maybe due to some technical issues, some of the projects may fail, or due to some administrative procedures, or some other due to economic reasons may not possibly be finalized, but hopefully a majority of those will be commissioned soon. Otherwise, in the supply security strategy document, we set some targets, and we may not succeed in having this 20,000 megawatts of the WPP-based installed capacity. Target will not be satisfied. But I know we have huge interest from the industry. We have received new applications by April, and as discussed by the chairman, we have almost 40,000 megawatts of an application for 3,000 megawatts on more than 10-fold. Means that the industry is still very ambitious, and therefore the result to be drawn out of this is that we have enough incentives and support. But on the other hand, I would say those who are in process, whether they will be finalized or not, what challenges they have. Another topic, and that's also my request from the panels, not only from the perspective of the wind power plants, but also there's a market in here. And therefore the turbine manufacturers, the equipment suppliers, they also have an interest in this market. And they even have local interest. Even they are thinking about doing the manufacturing at the local level. At least we have two blade manufacturers. We have tower manufacturers. In assembly and erection, we have a good experience. Again, in service and support service, we also have a good market. Of course, there is room for improvement, and if this is the case or not, we'll discuss, and then we'll try to understand whether it will be a hub or not. Maybe it is a similar analogy, but if you fly from Istanbul to Ankara or so, and you're just, responding to 3 billion of a population if you fly from Istanbul to a certain destination or from Ankara to a certain destination. Within a circle, you have access to a huge population. After those introductory remarks, I will just follow the order in here, if you allow me. First, Tuna Güven. He is the member to the executive board of the Turkish Wind Energy Association, and also he's a manager and a player in the market. In 1977, born in Çorlu, Tekirdağ, married with 2 children. In 1999, graduated from Civil Engineering Department of Istanbul University, and Marmara University had Masters on Finance. At Uludağ University, now having his PhD on economy. And for 14 years, he is working at Borusan. It's an important player. Recently, at Borusan ENB, he's operation director at ENBW, Borusan. The floor is yours. 15 minutes, please. We plan 15 minutes. And I'll be glad if you stick to the time limit. If time allows, we will get to questions. Yes, please, Tuna. Ladies and gentlemen, and dear chairman and the panelists, once again, welcome. That is the first day of TWEC. That's the very last session. And we've been very tired, of course. And therefore, I will keep my talk as short as possible. Actually, my notes will be reflected on the slide. My slides will be reflected on the screen. So the question is whether Turkey will be a regional hub in terms of wind energy or not. Let me say it from the very beginning, yes. And I'll tell why. First of all, Turkey has a target of 20,000 megawatts. That is the domestic market that we have, and it's an important driving force. And there is also a major wind potential in the surrounding countries. I'll be sharing some figures with you lately. And according to my rough calculations, 35,000 megawatt worth of the potential. There will be such an installed capacity, including the countries in the region by 2023-25. And there is an important industrial infrastructure in Turkey. We have qualified, well-trained human resources. And on the top of this, especially with the countries in the region, we're already working with them. We're pretty active in terms of transportation, construction. We already have presence there in all fields. Therefore, in the wind energy, whether Turkey will be a hub or not, yes. Now let me support this argument with some figures. It is not only the market size that do you think it would be adequate to make us a regional hub? I will share my personal opinion with you, and I'll have some recommendations. Now, looking at the averages of 2012 and 2013, as I told you, Turkey has an important wind potential. And looking at the capacity factors of the different countries, it's around 20s. And Germany, Denmark, and Spain, the capacity factor around 20s. On the other hand, Germany, 39 gigawatt of an installed capacity. Denmark, 4.8 gigawatts by the end of 2014, and Spain, 22.3 gigawatts of an installed capacity. Therefore, there's a 20% of a wind potential, the capacity factor, and this capacity factor corresponds to that much of installed capacity. Looking at its share within the entire total, it's around, again, 20s, 22%. Therefore, in a country with a capacity factor of 20, up to the 20% of it is installed capacity, total installed capacity, it's possible to have such a share in the world. How about the situation in Turkey? This figure that I will tell you is 80 meters of a hub. The higher the turbines are, the hub level will go up, and therefore this capacity factor would increase. In Turkey, 4.2 gigawatts, 4,200 megawatts, 71 gigawatt installed capacity. In 2023, installed capacity would be 120, the total installed capacity, and assuming that wind will be 20%, it is corresponding to 16.6%. Therefore, in the upcoming 8 years, for 2023 target, in Turkey, if all these investments are made around 2,000 megawatts, not 1,000. And if we can transform the wind potential into an installed capacity, then we'll have an important domestic market. How about the countries in the region? They have 36,000 megawatts, as I told you. Also very briefly. So, different figures at different parts of the world. These are the data from the Global Wind Energy Council, World Bank. They all have certain projections. It's just my own rough estimation. Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Algeria, for example, 2030 target 2,000 megawatts. And in Saudi Arabia, 9,000 megawatts onshore turbine for 2032. If you add them one by one, 20 gigawatts of Turkey's target by 2023, and considering the surrounding countries, we have 35 gigawatts of wind estimation that they have for their own countries. Therefore, Turkey, whether it will be a regional hub or not, yes, I said. Why? Because her domestic market and the markets in the surrounding countries, there is actually a huge onshore capacity for wind. Whether it will turn into a market or not, that's why we're working hard on this. We're just trying to form a market here and create a market in here. And in doing so, once we introduce the things that I'll be telling you soon, then it would be possible for Turkey to be a hub easily. First of all, the turbine manufacturers and with their subcontractors, if you would like to attract them to Turkey, to invest in Turkey, as I told you, we actually have to allow for 1,000 megawatts and over of an installed capacity. But we have to enable this installed capacity by properly implementing the tenders. We should not have any delays in the tendering process. On the other hand, we're always focusing on the turbine manufacturing, and let's do it also in the country. But sometimes you may visualize it as the manufacturing of the entire turbine. That's not what I'm saying. I'm speaking about components, manufacturing the components. Minibus project, for example, showed us that by 90%, all the components in a turbine, by 90% can either possibly be manufactured locally in Turkey, or their counterparts, equivalent components, could be manufactured. We have the organized industrial sites. We have chip manufacturing, producers of electromechanical equipment. We have several shops, and all these companies can possibly also produce the components of a wind turbine. And if we have an incentive law, and if we also include the companies to be established within the organized industrial estates, and if we also include the companies that are capable of producing the components of turbines, and if we include them under the Region 5, under the law, then I believe that it will open up the gates for them. But these are all short-term things that we can do easily, because our infrastructure is available for doing so. Another important matter, as discussed a lot in the previous sessions, well, we always put on our energy policy goggle while trying to understand the wind energy. That's what the energy demand would be, and so as to generate it locally, we have to invest in wind. Now, if we also turn this into an industrial policy at the same time, besides an energy policy, if you're asking me, it is much, much easier to become a regional hub. Like TWEA or the Turkish Industrials Businessmen Association, all these NGOs should assume responsibility. The components in a turbine, which of those can be manufactured by our local manufacturers at industrial estate zones? It's easy to make such a survey. On the top of this, all these lists can be shared with the representatives of the industry, and the companies owning the patent can meet with such manufacturers, and I'm sure it can create a domino effect, and therefore it can open up the path for local component manufacturing. But as I told you, our wind energy policy should also be turned into an industrial policy, and they should work hand in hand. Another thing is this 20,000 megawatts that we are speaking about by 2023. I think it was 8 megawatts for a year, the installed capacity. I checked the figures of Germany, and in the last decade, 1,500 megawatts was the lowest year. It means that this 20,000 megawatts up to 23, and having such an installed capacity, we need to take some steps. And the most thing is that the renewable energy support mechanism, especially during the repayment period, the repayment of the bank loan, which is between 12 to 14 years, I believe that this mechanism should be extended to the repayment period. Macroeconomically, when we look at the world, the wind, the renewables, I mean, it is not possible to do anything without any incentive. There always will be an incentive mechanism, a support mechanism. So such an extension of the support mechanism would be very useful for the investors, I suppose. That's all I can say. Thank you. Thank you, Tuna. You really touched upon very critical issues, in particular with regards to this local manufacturing and cooperating with the organized industrial estates, and put them under the coverage of the 5th region investment incentive is all important. What I can say is, rather than deploying it all around the country, maybe it would be possible to have a specialized organized industrial zone. I mean, maybe we should focus on one specific province, one specific industrial estate. Would be much better for logistics purposes. An estate, for example, already qualified enough to do so. Maybe I can say something in here. Now, looking at the capacity of the organized industrial estates in the country, I don't know about it, but for Izmir, 34%, they are using 34% of their capacity only. The reason I propose this is that they already have a 64% of an idle capacity, so it would be much better to work on this. Just a figure. I have a question. Tuna, at the same time, is representing also a company with a foreign partner. Before the global crisis, the biggest problem of the industry is that we were waiting on the queue of the turbine manufacturers on their gates. But after the crisis, they are now coming to us, approaching us. Maybe we're just overcoming the crisis that has started in the US and it starts giving signals in Europe. You mentioned 1,500 megawatts of an installed capacity investment, if you have such a plan. Do you think the suppliers are capable enough to meet our demands? Do you think we will have longer deadlines for delivery or what? And price as well, of course, because the prices are reduced now. Because of competition, I'm wondering whether the prices will go up or not. Well, for the upcoming 2 years, especially with, it's an advantage with that strong US, I mean in Turkey, with that foreign exchange regime. There is actually a reduction in the demand in all around the world, but on the other hand, very major investors like Germany, Denmark, United States, especially in wind, as they have reached to a certain level of maturation, if this 1,500 or 2,000 megawatts of planning that we make for 2016, 2017, it will not be a big issue in my opinion. On the other hand, once you have such a thing, once you have established such a infrastructure, more will come. I think we have to do something immediately. That's all I can say. Thank you, Tuna, for this talk. Next speaker, Ömer Faruk Özgül, and member to the board of TWEA and the CEO of Özgül Holding. Also an important investor. He's a mechanical engineer. He had his PhD in Harvard University on the fluids mechanics that he had his PhD. Started in 1985 his career in shipbuilding sector as an entrepreneur. Again, worked in the shipbuilding industry, and after his such experience, he became member to the BOD of major energy companies. Also at Borusan Holding, as much as I know, you are the consultant to Borusan. So, Ömer Faruk, we want you to discuss about the challenges experienced by the investors in Turkey, whether we still have opportunities, and your comments as well. The floor is yours. Thank you. Now, looking at the energy industry, in particular the wind energy, it is actually it is an industry that we have more uncertainties, where the body is actually bigger than the brain, or growing more than the brain. In the wind industry, the body actually has grown so fast, and the brain cannot catch up with this. To make it synchronize, there are three things. The first one is the legislation. The second one is the stability in the country. And the third thing is actually the experience in the industry. The legislative framework, the Ministry of Energy and EMRA worked in coordination, and it all completed in 2009. And therefore, I actually prefer to make an assessment in the name of my country rather than by wearing the hat as an investor. I think the loophole in the legislation is not something that you can use as an excuse as an investor. In terms of stability in the country, 2 days ago we had the general election, so this is also out of question. Now, sector-specific experience. I think you can see that we have high crowd in here, and as you can see, the people are speaking the language of a technocrat, so we already have the experience in the country. I think the incentive mechanisms that we are always speaking about, I think I have a couple of words to say about this. United States, the most liberal economy in the world, they actually have a saying in incentives. Incentive is not something that you use to push people. It is actually a support mechanism so as to avoid people to fall down. As an investor, if you consider incentives something that pushes you, then it means that the revenues of the state from other resources will be presented to us unfairly, which is not something good for social justice. And EWEA CEO in the morning mentioned that the 10-year feed-in tariff or the support mechanism should be increased up to 15 years. Now, you all know about our feed-in tariff. Until 2020, for the power plants to be commissioned until 2020, that's the purchasing guarantee for 10 years. But ours is already 15 years. On the top of this, the banks providing us the financing. They also get their financing from international banks. In the executive dinner last night, I mentioned about something. EBRD has a 5 million euros worth of funding for renewable energy, and Turkey will be using it. And it is the Ministry of Energy that they will be coordinating with. This is a clear indication that they trust the government. And therefore, those to make use of this incentive and the mechanisms for this financing, I believe the structure should have its own incentives. What could that be? We, as the investors, the biggest challenge that we have is the difference in the foreign exchange rates. There is the need to have a hedging system, and the hedging must be left to the financier, not the investor. I mean, the financier is giving us the credit, and they actually have to be in charge of fixing it over Turkish liras, and they can have their own insurance, which is something very attractive for the investor. And after the grace period, the repayment period, with our, again, YEKDEM, the Renewable Energy Support Mechanism, is equivalent to the portion that is under guarantee. What we do not understand is the assets given by the state. The state is given 49 years of a license. It's a concession of 49 years. The facility that you are using, 25 years is the insurance cycle. I mean, the life cycle for insurance. And after 25 years, the state is not saying you have to renew it. I'm so clear about this. If I'm from the public side, I'm giving the resource, the wind. And for you to use it more efficiently, after 25 years, you actually have to adopt it to the technology after 25 years. I mean, if I were the state, I would ask for this. And especially in the wind energy, this country, whether it be a regional hub or not, Tuna said yes, but I'm saying it already happens. I mean, all these turbine manufacturers, if they do not seek profit, they would not come here. They're all here. The foreign banks would not like to give their funding to the country. It's all about the reliability of the country and the industry. But of course, we have a lot to do. I mean, it's not actually something so good atmosphere. As the investors, of course, we want the legislation to be adopted to ourselves, but we also have to adapt ourselves to the legislation. And the biggest issue that I observe is that, in terms of legislation, especially your authority, there's nothing wrong, there's no deficiency. But the problem is mainly about your legislation is not synchronized with the Ministry of Environment, with the military, and so on. That's the problem that we have. And everyone is seeking to prove her own power. And they are testing the investors for the exercise of their own power. I think we can have a coordination board just like we have the Economic Coordination Board, for example. I think the Ministry of Energy can chair this. Forestry, Environment, Finance, even the Chief of Staff should be a part of this coordination board. I'm sure that we can shorten this period in terms of the legislation. And while criticizing the delays in terms of the legislation, I think it was in 2009 we went to Germany together with you, Tuna, and Borusan's partner, NBW, there was a river-type power plant, and it took 18 years to take the license. I mean, I think that's the end of the word. I mean, I think we also have to question ourselves. Frankly speaking, for myself, for my country, and forget about being a regional hub, I would say even our country has a position in the world. I'm not saying will have, it already has a position in the world. And therefore, as the stakeholders in the industry, the lawmakers, the investors, the financiers, those giving engineering services, we just need synchronization. And we have to have some better synchronization. Thank you. Thank you, Ömer Faruk. You have really touched upon so important things. You mentioned that the body is growing actually faster than the brain. It's actually like an Indian joke, I will make it. The Indian leader is at the front and running on the horse, and the leader stopped and the rest of the people stopped on the horses, and then he said, we actually ride the horses so fast that our spirits cannot catch up with our bodies. You are right, of course there are things that are slowing down. Some of the things are just going in a slower pace. Of course, especially the institutions in particular, having the mission of the energy, of course they would like to be the pioneers, but especially there are some deficiencies because of like the development or forestry or environment and so on. Yes, it's really give us too much pain. This one-stop shop practice in particular, I believe would be useful or not, but I think it was 2013, an EU directive, there was such a recommendation, I suppose, and I was in Europe for representing my authority, and I asked the representative of Hungary whether you will have one-stop shop or not. They said there is a directive, but we're not sure about it. I mean, making the regulatory authority in charge of all, so the investors will not go and knock on the door of 9 separate agencies. I also totally believe in this, but let's assume that's the case. I mean, the energy market regulatory authority would be the one-stop shop. I will ask the Minister of Forestry, the expropriation administration, one by one. I also will write a letter, but it will say that. Then this time, I'm sure the investor will go and knock the door of the Minister of Forestry and will say, actually, the authority has already sent you a letter. Why are you not replying it back? I mean, the investors should always be a part of it. But the biggest and most important thing I would say about EMRA is that, I mean, we set some deadlines for certain procedures, both on the side of the investor and the authority. And we set some deadlines, like you have to reply back in 15 days, 90 days, or so on. And I believe that also must be the practice of the other agencies. With regards to environmental impact assessment, as you all know, the deadline is 9 months, 300 days, the famous 300 days. I mean, receiving the letter, no need for an environmental impact assessment, is something that you can do in 3 months' time. But if it is required, then it can be over 300 days. And the DG for EIA said it will be 300 or 400 days. It would be 40 days. I mean, we cannot be bound by deadlines. I'm the public authority, they said. But you know, as an agency, of course, you should have some deadlines. It's just one example. But I suppose the more that we talk, the more that we discuss, I think also the Prime Ministry should take some responsibility. That's why I will now give the floor to the Prime Minister's Investment Support and Promotion Agency, because Prime Minister is the head of the cabinet. And I'm sure that you are also in charge of the coordination of interministerial works. And it's a pretty nice investment agency. Of course, it is mainly for attracting foreign investors to Turkey, I know. That's why maybe we should change the concept. Maybe saying international investors would be good to say, because it would be nice to say foreign investors. International investors is a much better word, because we have very important guests in here, and they are here in Turkey and investing. And so I will leave the floor to Furkan. He's from the Prime Minister's Investment Support and Promotion Agency, and he's the head of the department. He was in charge of the Bay countries, and he was a project director, and he also worked as a senior project director for energy investments. And in Middle East Technical University, mechanical engineer. At Sabancı University, on energy technologies and management, he had his master's degree. And ISPAT is actually an official agency, and it is directly under the Prime Minister's office, and especially helping the investors in their entry into the Turkish market before, during, and after. So I want Furkan to focus on the opportunities offered by Turkey to international investors. We also expect you to make some self-criticism as well. I don't know if you feel like you have some deficiencies. It also would be nice to hear that. Specific on wind energy, of course, maybe in overall energy investments. What is the investment environment? What is the situation? But before that, one thing I would like to underline, as a public officer in the past, I think we had a lot of elections recently as Turkey, and 2 days ago we have finally reached a conclusion. Hope it will be good for the country. But there is one thing that the Prime Minister was saying. We actually have to turn back to the default configuration. Sometimes we forget that, and it actually had a certain reflection from the society. I'm wondering, is there the need to turn back to the default settings also for the public agencies? They also have been serving for a long time, and that's why we receive some complaints from the industry that things are going very slow. So I'm wondering how you can speed up your pace. Also, please touch upon that. I think it would be good for the audience. Yes, floor is yours. Thank you. Then, very briefly, I'll speak about my agency and our mission. Because as you mentioned, we're always focusing on abroad. And therefore, it is actually, even people know us as the Prime Ministry Development Agency. Actually, in 2006, we were established under the Office of the Prime Ministry. This investment agency concept is something that is applicable all around the world. And investment promotion agency, it's all about facilitation. I mean, trying to facilitate the business for the investors, and better to say, from the side of the public in particular, trying to be on the side of the investor against bureaucracy or against the state, in other words. So we have two main functions. The first thing is we're supporting the investors, especially for the projects that they apply for or for the projects that they implement. We provide them support, sometimes for finding sites, site selection, or for finding partners, or for finding suppliers, or maybe there is a problem that they have. There is a bottleneck that they cannot overcome. I mean, the foreign investors cannot easily overcome the obstacles from time to time. We also receive people from China, Taiwan, India, and they find themselves in another environment. Therefore, this investment promotion concept is also something discussed by the World Bank, the UN, so as to further the global investments. Another function and mission of us is that to promote the investment opportunities in Turkey worldwide, and we're trying to do it as effective as possible. For example, we were in some of the industries in the past, like the energy, and we also have selected certain countries, both on sector-specific and country-specific objectives. We're using McKinsey, Deloitte, again, we are also using such consulting companies to which, for example, countries we should focus on, how we can approach to them case by case. That's how we work on. And also by the consultants in those countries, and they could be of the nationalities of those countries. That's how we work. It is not only energy, of course. In several specific industries we have all these activities, but energy is an important one of the priority industries that we have. Also, for international foreign direct investment that I would like to mention about, since 2002, we had been through a reform process, and we actually have a stability also in FDI as well. Especially after 2002, in this 13 years, if we have a look at the international direct investment, it's actually increased by 10-fold when we compare before 2002. It was $50 million until 2002, over $150 million after 2002, and almost 16 billion to the energy. This is important because it's important to make such a correlation. I mean, especially the total, it is, 1/10 of the international direct investment annually is going to energy. And for the last 2 years especially, of course, we had regional instability and so on, but looking at the figures of the central bank, this 12 billion from 2014 remains the same when compared to the previous year. And by month 8 of 2015, 35% of an increase when compared to the previous year. And it is $12 billion for the last 8 months. And again, 1/10 of it is on energy. So, what we offer to the investors. We talk to the companies that we selected. It could be energy or any other. First of all, they are really attaching importance to Turkey. It is actually, they are aware of the stability for the last 10 years. And when we approach to them, they are saying that Turkey is already on the top of the list that we would like to invest. And then for the companies that we discuss, of course, as a part of our mission, if it is the energy, then we ask them to contact with the Ministry of Energy or EMRA, especially for the foreign investors, international investors, I would like to say, in several different sectors. We're trying to coordinate, but trust me, the best communication that we have is with the Ministry of Energy, with EMRA, because they really understand the language of the investor. And once we enable them to see each other, they actually have a good experience because they have the capacity to do so. And we can proceed very quickly with them. Whether Turkey will be a regional hub or not, I mean, in terms of the generation of wind energy and equipment manufacture, yes, both possible. What are the opportunities that we offer to the international investors? What are the advantages of Turkey? Of course, the domestic demand of Turkey. The population, the surface area. We have a domestic demand. Why it's important in wind? I mean, of course, domestic demand is important, but it's may not be so important. Let's consider the automotive industry. If an investor is to come to Turkey, like Toyota, but investing in here, but exporting 90% of the production in Turkey, and just a small portion is sent in here. So that's the plan. The other automotive companies as well, even if they are going to make more than half to export, again they consider the domestic market as a part of it. But in wind, domestic market is important. I mean, for the investments to come, like TPI in Izmir, they're working, focusing on export. Even if they are to do export, they are considering the domestic demand. And looking at the last 13 years of Turkey, except for the times of crisis, we always have a demand, 5%, 6%. Maybe there could be some political instability and some seasonal fluctuations, but that's the potential of Turkey. Besides that, Turkey has a very strategic location. This is also an advantage which will remain always the same. And there are international, multinational companies that consider Turkey as a hub. Coca-Cola is, for example, managing over 100 countries from Turkey. We have quite a long list. I mean, several multinational companies have selected Turkey as a regional hub for their management purposes. Again, we are competing with Dubai in terms of having a financial center. And in energy, yes, we ask them to come to Turkey. And another perspective for Turkey is that we are actually a production center of the region, maybe like the Germany of Europe. And of course, we have to have more added value on the production, but still, when you compare Turkey with the other countries, they understand the infrastructure, the supply chain in the country, and they're pretty much more and better aware than us in terms of the opportunities that we have. Again, from the regional perspective, we're not China or India, of course, but we also have lower labor costs. And in the automotive, which is linked to wind, there is a certain clustering. Also, since the morning, as we've been discussing, there is the need for more human resources, but of course there are some technical schools being established, and we'll have more technical staff for service purposes as well. How about the worldwide wind investments, and how could Turkey's share would be? 350,000 megawatts, I suppose, that's the share in the world. And it will go up to 600,000. Of course, there's already a polarization. China, India consider Asia as another pole, Latin America, Brazil, another pole. And in Europe, there is a certain maturation, and that is actually an opportunity that we can use as being a regional hub. Of course, maybe they are actually slowing down the process of bringing their equipment in here, but of course, which is fair to do so. As Ömer Faruk stated, at Listen Tower in Blade, Turkey is at a certain point, and in the supply chain, Turkey has a role, and our goal is to raise the value of the supply chain, and that's what we're working on. Now, what the investors are thinking about Turkey. Of course, after we told them about this, of course, the investors, as you all know, are always smart, and they are smarter than us and as the public agencies. First is energy generation and equipment manufacturing. First, they look for the OEMs, and the investors are always saying the volume of the opportunity, okay, 20,000 megawatts and so on. But once you enter into a tender, would it worth applying for it? And we tell them about the procurement, the tendering process in Turkey, and they compare it with the other countries and asking why this is not the case in your country. And that scale economy, they want that scale economy to be possible. Same for the equipment manufacturers. They ask for the feed-in tariffs as well. 10 years is not adequate for them, of course. And speaking about 20 years for project financing, but for bank financing, at least that's adequate. So they start the process, and again, we have started this, renewable energy support mechanism since 2014, and all the investors will move to that support mechanism. Probably in the upcoming period, we will have a 4-year election-free period, so this is a nice time, because that's the exchange rates that we have. Maybe as a country we have a disadvantage, but it's an advantage for the support mechanism. Of course, we are not speaking about the cost in the country, but so the feed-in tariff could be an advantage for them. We mentioned about up to 55% of the local manufacturing. I mean, 50% will be added on the top of feed-in tariff by pushing their own OEMs to Turkey. That's how we briefed them. As I told you, they are also telling us that we need some new models. They give example Morocco. I think Tuna, you have a 600 megawatts of a volume as an installed capacity, but 850 megawatts of a tender that they started. 20% will be by the SMEs in Morocco. That's the requirement, but only just a couple consortium will be applying for the tender, and those companies will shape their long-term strategy accordingly. So I'm sure that everything would be much more predictable for them. This also could be an opportunity. Minister of Energy is working on this. There will be some specialized areas for energy. It was in Mersin Ceyhan in 2002, mainly on petrochemicals. At Karaman, there is a specialized area, will be for solar. It's all about making a prediction about the initial volume to be offered. I think up to 1,800 megawatts. And what is going to be the volume of the largest share, and so whether solar can be, applied also for wind or not. I'm sure it would be possible as an agency. That's what we're working on. And lastly, I'm also in charge of promotion. I think Turkey is not doing so well in PR. Actually, we have a perfect wind atlas map. We have perfect clusters. As Tuna stated, looking at each and every component, we possibly can manufacture it, but we have to promote ourselves. I think it would be nice to select either a region or a province, İzmir, Manisa, Balıkesir, Çanakkale, Mersin, Hatay, but I think İzmir is much more on the forefront, together with İzmir Development Agency and with the other agencies in charge of promotion, as they need to start a road shop in Lyon and Copenhagen, like Barcelona would have actually such a name, and we have to promote ourselves. India, right now, started a PR about making India. And nothing has changed. They just add more colors. And they now have a new web page, and they're just doing some activities and events. And they actually have increased the investment. Nothing has changed in the legislation. All the incentives, everything the same. But they have several campaigns, so it is our responsibility as the agency to do something about it in the upcoming period. Lastly, in Turkey, there is the need to have R&D activities. It's a must for everything. in some of the countries, it is via the universities. Middle East Technical University, Sabancı, Istanbul Technical University. They are doing some work on the local turbines. I don't know to what extent they are cooperating with the industry. It doesn't have to be universities. I mean, in attracting foreign investors, we're always telling them, work together with the university, work together with an R&D center. And we're also telling them about the R&D support provided by the Turkish Scientific Council. In the automotive, we had an ecosystem. The OEMs, they first came to Turkey and provided for a supply chain, and rather than a textile country, turned into an automotive industry country. I think we also should catch up with this in the energy. R&D is a must. As Ömer Faruk stated, we also should further these developments, and we're working on this. That's why this Congress is very important. I mean, we cannot find all the investors at the same time, and it's important to receive some feedback from the field, and we have to have self-development. This inventory is a must. We need such an inventory. I don't know, maybe I can actually be a volunteer to do so, and we're open to any support. Thank you. Thank you, Furkan. Actually, the technicians in here, in the audience, the people, are energetic people, but we don't have much air. Would you please run the air conditioner, because the energy is going down in the audience. So we need some wind. Furkan really touched upon so important issues, especially in the last 5 years. Maybe the economy actually a bit stagnated, but still we attracted a lot of international investment. And by 10, 13, 15% of this was in the energy. So he also underlined, to be a regional hub, we already have the conditions and the opportunities. Mainly speaking, in the EU, in the Eurozone, there is actually a maturation in the market, and they are seeking for new markets. And Turkey is good in terms of domestic market, and as in terms of the regional market, can be a good opportunity. So, taking this opportunity, we have a very distinguished guest from abroad. Is this the case, really? How Turkey is observed in terms of making an investment on wind and in terms of turbine equipment manufacturing or supply? Do you think how the investors do see Turkey? John Charles is wearing two hats. For a long time, he worked on turbine manufacturers, and recently, his company is making also investments in wind power, so he's competent in both fields. Very briefly, his CV, and then I will give the floor. John Charles, in June 2015, is the head of the EMEA, and he joined Envision with this title. Before that, at Siemens Wind, he worked for 3 years as a senior manager. 2007-2012, under Vestas and Northern Europe, he was the senior vice president. He successfully completed that. And before joining the wind in United Technologies, he also assumed several positions. Electrical engineer, and had an MBA from the Manchester University. I think John Charles will have a presentation, and he will make a presentation. Before John starts his talk, I have a request from John, and he is very experienced in different regions. So, if you compare Turkey, please, with also countries in the region, I would be happy if you make such a comparison. And I know he's interested in the Chinese market, and also in China, there's an increase in terms of installed capacity, and also in equipment manufacturing, they are taking a role as China. And The turbine manufacturers in Turkey are, of course, towards the West. We use Western technology. Of course, if you don't mind, maybe you cannot, of course, give brand names, but would be nice if you compare Asia and Europe in terms of the opportunities and the technology that they have. Thank you very much. Floor is yours.
From Tradition. Great. Thanks very much for, firstly, thanks to the Turkish Wind Energy Association for allowing Envision to speak at this conference. It's very important for us to come to events like this and share the perspectives. And I have quite a weight on my shoulder now that I'm sharing the perspectives not only from Envision, but the supplier side of the industry. But I think as a new investor in Turkey, I just want to give you a quick perspective on Envision of who we are, and then I think it gives you a clear understanding of where we're coming from and who we are and why we're making this investment into Turkey. And we are seeing it as a regional hub investment. So Envision are here, and our mission is to solve the challenges for a sustainable future for mankind. That's our overarching mission. But as it's been mentioned, our roots are from China. We started our organisation close to 2008, and we're not a state-owned enterprise in China, which is quite unique in the China wind energy market. Our products and services, we manufacture turbine solutions, we manufacture software solutions, and we also run energy management solutions as well, and I'll just explain a bit more about that. In terms of our footprint, yes, we're rooted heavily in China, but we're expanding very, very rapidly, and that's why we're making significant investments in certain regions of the world, and Turkey is one of those. But we've had an R&D centre in Denmark for a good number of years, which has really brought forward a lot of our learnings from the wind industry that we've transferred into our China organisation. And we've got a lot of software management skills from our facilities over in the US, in the Silicon Valley over in the US there. But Envision, and who are we? We are a world-leading supplier of smart wind turbine solutions. And in fact, last year we were number 3 in China, the biggest market in the world for wind. And effectively that created us to be number 10 in the world. So, we're a big player in our home market, and now we're investing into new markets. And I think that's the context of this. The context of this discussion is really about how do we see as a new entrant into the Turkey and why we're making this investment into Turkey. Just talk quickly about our turbines, and there's a reason for this. I'm not trying to just sell, it's not a sales pitch for Envision, it's just trying to explain the reason, the background of this context. We are defining the future of turbine technology, but actually, from an Envision perspective, it's not a revolution. You'll see this in our technology. The software is the real core competence of our technology, because this industry doesn't need a revolution. I've been in other organisations where the pushing the grounds of innovation really starts to bring some issues forward when you're pushing innovation. So Envision are not pushing innovation from the hardware perspective, we're very much pushing the innovation from the software perspective. And this is the core thing for my speech today is around predominantly creating a hub and creating investments into countries needs a supply chain within those countries. And when you look at an Envision turbine, this is our supply chain. So there's not many Chinese manufacturers in that supply chain. We're reliant on internationally branded suppliers, and there's other suppliers on top of these. The tower manufacturers, we use global tower manufacturers as well that are well recognised as well. But I think that's a key point when you're thinking about creating a regional hub are the supply chain organisations focused on those hubs. I'll spend a bit more on that shortly. And then just to bring back to Envision, we run a huge amount of assets in terms of our management system, our software management systems. So we've got 13 gig of turbines that are under management. So, enough on Envision. Let's look at it from why are we making this investment, and why do we see this as a regional centre for wind? Certainly it's been touched on, and I think a lot of these points, the panel's already mentioned a lot of these points, and I completely concur with them. But, from a geographical location, Turkey right now, from our perspective and from my personal perspective, is right in the middle. We're not Europe and we're not Asia, we're right in the middle. So you've got the benefit of the geographical location. You've got the benefit of the cultural links that's associated with that. This is a strong trading hub and has been for many, many thousands of years. So I think there's a lot of good things in terms of the cultural links that are here. Yes, it's a competitive market, and I think other industry has proven that you are competitive. Turkey is competitive for an investment. The automotive industry is a good example that have made investments here, and quite rightly has been mentioned, it's not about a domestic market. It's actually an export investment that those guys have made. So, it is competitive. I think, the political and social will for renewables is there, and in a lot of discussion I've been listening to this morning, there's definitely political will and certainly social acceptance is there for renewables as a whole. And that's really born from the need to have energy independency. I think a lot of countries are starting to realise the need for energy independency. Somebody said to me, is Turkey not an emerging market? Let's just look at what Turkey's done over the years now. It is a mature market for wind. And in actual fact, when you look at the installed capacity in Turkey right now and the growth rates that you've been going through over the past years, it is actually classified as a mature market from an Envision perspective, because you definitely are hitting the boundaries of the 1 gigawatt per annum, and then looking at the targets for 2023, you're going to have to accelerate that, and we want to be part of that acceleration. So it's definitely a mature market for wind, and that definitely indicates to us as an investor, it's not an emerging market. There is surety. There's not the uncertainty that an emerging market has. So there's clear targets in place. We'll come back to the clear targets, because I think it's clearly recognised today that some of the clarity of that target isn't so clear, so we'll come back to that. The transparency of the process compared to other markets, and I'm looking at it from the perspective predominantly in Europe, compared to other markets, it is a transparent process that's here, but there's definitely work that can be done to help the speed of the process. There is a tariff scheme. It's in a recognised currency, and from an Envision perspective, coming from China, where we have seen recently massive impacts in currency devaluations against the RMB. The dollar is a good signal to us to invest into this country. So I think that's a very strong position, is to have the tariff scheme based in dollars. And it comes back to this maturity. There is supply chain here. That, we've seen tower manufacturers invest, we've seen blade manufacturers invest, we've seen other suppliers that I've shown on the list. There are some of those suppliers that are investing in Turkey now. So the supply chain is starting to appear with a track record. I think to make it a regional hub, you've got to attract more of that supply chain, because from a turbine manufacturing perspective, there isn't a great deal of manufacturing going on in most of those companies. Most of what we're doing is assembly. We're reliant on a lot of specialised manufacturers, and if we have to drag them heavy piece of equipment from other places in the world to this market, then that's very costly. And it's that transportation cost dynamic that we're challenged with when we look at investments from an assembly perspective. And there's clearly support mechanisms for local content that we've also mentioned. And I think, just to say, Envision has made the strategic intent to invest in the Turkish market from my region of EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa. We're here, we're investing, and we see it as a very strong place from a regional hub. The 9 years I've been in the industry, I've recognised the fact that the customers in certain markets take you into new markets. And I like the fact that Turkey can take us into some of the emerging markets as well. So I think that's a strong position that Turkey has in this relationship and cultural aspect with this geographical location. So how to take the initiative and how to move forward from our perspective and from the industry perspective, we always scream and shout, it's all about stability. Stability, stability, stability. Money is just like water. It takes the path of least resistance. And that's where, if investors, as we heard a lot about in some of the other panel sessions, they are constantly reviewing the markets of where stability, long-term stability is there. And if you can build trust with investors and you maintain that stability, then further investment flows. I live in Sweden. There's a reason why I moved from the UK to Sweden, because the industry really took off as the global economical situation started to decline. Sweden's like a bumblebee. It shouldn't fly, because economically it really is a challenge. The energy price, this green certificate mechanism, it's a real problem. But there's a great case example of money takes the path of least resistance, because it's not just about significant returns to get that investment, it's about surety of the investment. And I think that's a key message that we want to deliver. And with that, Turkey needs to be globally bankable. We can't just rely on local investors. We need international investors like ourselves, but to bring in the international finance organizations as well. So Turkey needs to establish this recognition of being globally bankable. Turkey should reach out to their regional friends and support their growth together. We've heard the call for bringing in R&D specialists, but as I've mentioned, Turkey is a mature market now and is recognized as a mature market. And I think your local neighbours will welcome the opportunity for the support that you can give them in terms of the expertise of the processes you've been through, the change of the systems to accommodate the grid build-out that's desperately needed in a lot of these markets. So I think, be bold and go to these partners and say, we actually have a success criteria that we can share with you and support their growth together. If not, you'll be competing with these local friends. I went to the Egyptian wind energy event 2 weeks ago, and they are really pushing hard how they can become a regional hub. So you've got some close neighbours that are really thinking about this, and I think you either sit back and let it happen or do something about it. So support their growth and maintain that cultural neutrality. It's a really strong position from our business perspective. You are not seen as a European country. You're not seen as an Asian country. Keep that neutrality. It's very beneficial to you as a country. Remove uncertainty by simplification. I said earlier about the transparent process, but we're hearing a lot over the past few hours about, there are still big delays in the projects even when they get through the licensing regime, and there's a lot of uncertainty that the financial institutions. So, simplification. And then look at, I think there was a call this morning to look at the fairness of the subsidies as well, and let's be transparent about those subsidies. If there are other generating plant that's getting hidden subsidies, let's be fair and transparent about those things so people can see that the business case for wind is true and valid. And then finally, support certainty. Let's look at the longer term tariffs. We've said many times that the financial institutions and the way a wind project is financed potentially is longer than 10 years. And the incentive scheme is for 10 years right now. And that creates a level of uncertainty to the international investor. So play to the international investor and look at ways to make sure we maintain that tariff mechanism for the lifetime of the loan tenors. And then back to the target. I think there is definitely a mixed message being delivered. There's this strong and bold target of 20 gig by 2023, but then there are other proposals being put forward in other documents. And I think Turkey really needs to stand behind the target, fix the target, stand behind the target, which will deliver the results. The industry will follow the players that give the best certainty, and that's exactly our message to this forum is, if you want a regional hub, let's make it happen. And it can happen, and from an Envision perspective, we see it happening, and that's why we are making the investment to see this as a regional hub. That's my presentation.
Thank you so much for a good presentation, Mr. John. John,
thank you very much, John. Really. I mean, it's important to actually have a foreign investor's eye and pretty well introduced. And especially you mentioned that so as to improve the climate, investment climate in Turkey and to attract more attention, what we should do as Turkey. You also listed that down in your presentation, especially stability that you focused on in particular is pretty important. Of course, from time to time, also, there's something that we heard from the local investors, that the regulations should not be changed frequently. It's also a part of the stability. And especially the regulatory authorities are also paying attention to this. They are also trying not to so frequently amend the regulation and the legislation. They're also paying attention to this. Meanwhile, you mentioned it's important that Turkey actually has set clear targets. Actually, interestingly, you mentioned Turkey is not a European or an Asian country, so we are very exclusive, I would say. And we are in contact with several different cultures, and we actually have very good relations with several countries, as you mentioned. That's why I'm highlighting it. He also mentioned about longer tariff, and as also mentioned by another panelist, and of course for the projects to be much more bankable. So once again, thank you very much. Actually, we're almost at the time of closing the session, but we have some people around in the audience. If you have some questions from the audience, I can get the questions. Any question from the audience? You can raise your hand so we can bring the microphone. I think it looks like in this panel we discussed whether Turkey will be a regional hub or not for wind energy. And I think, generally speaking, yes, maybe we are not a regional hub yet, but it is the high time that we can become a regional hub. Ömer Faruk is an exception, I would say, and the opportunities are already on the table, both for domestic and international investors. So as the panelists, we are calling upon you, be quick. I think that's the basic message. We have the Prime Minister's office in here. They are ready to give all the support, and our investors and said that they would like to cooperate. Also, our universities are doing good in R&D. I know some of them pretty closely. So I'm sure that international investors can also cooperate with the universities. Maybe we are manufacturing 50% of these turbines. Why not? Maybe we'll do 100% in the near future. So I would like to thank to the distinguished panelists on behalf of the organization and to the audience. Thank you for your patience again and for being in here. Now, among the panelists, we also have the board member of TWEA, Ömer Faruk. I think he will present certificates. There's a ceremony. And then that will be the end of the session. You know, I am now wearing my hat as the board member of TWEA. I will give a certificate to the moderator and also to the panelists. We will give you a certificate of attendance on the memorial of today.
Diğer arkadaşlara da teşekkür ederiz. Vakit ayırdınız. Burada evet, ormana bir dikili ağacımız da bizim oldu anlaşılan. Teşekkürler. Çok sağ olun. Biz de görebilecek miyiz Ömer Faruk Bey? Yani
Koordinasyon var.
alırlar mı bizi içeriden?
Koordinatör.
You got the three. İzmir.
İzmir Tire.